What's going on, 3DMJers? You are due for an update, and my apologies that it's taken me so long since the start of my contest prep series. We are actually 7 weeks out from WNBF Taiwan. I've been so busy. I've been finishing up the third edition of my books. I have been finishing up the Iron Culture documentary. And by I mean the amazing Brandon, who is helping this video get edited as well. That's something I'm excited to announce later this year, most likely, even that coming out. But, you know, for me, it's just been focusing on getting work done and letting the prep happen in the background. And that is the main thing that I wanted to talk about the importance of in this video. There's a big transition from being a novice physique competitor to an intermediate to advanced. And most of the time when we think about that, we think about, oh, how much muscle have I gained? How much more do I have left to gain? What type of techniques do I need to use? Do my macros change? Things like that. But it really comes down to the experience. When you are doing prep as a novice, you just don't know what to expect. So you have to do certain things to monitor and regulate the process so that you get the outcome you want. And you need to have more external monitoring tools like body weight, regular pictures, video, what have you. It really helps to have a coach oversee things and to tell you what you should expect, to normalize an experience that for you is quite abnormal. And the typical methods and tools that a first time, second time competitor might need differ from those that are more intermediate or advanced because they've walked this road before. Specifically, you might have read online about what the experience of contest prep is like. You might have talked to people. You might be reading books on it, etc. There's a lot of resources out there, but none of it can truly give you the experiential feel of it. You might know that being hungry is normal. Feeling fatigue is normal. You might know that it'll be challenging to stick to your diet. You might know that training will be hard to maintain at the same level of intensity or volume or intention that you had in the off season, that you're going to lose strength. But actually knowing what that feels like and knowing what's an appropriate amount of fatigue versus too much, an appropriate amount of hunger or too much at various stages as you get leaner based upon the size of your deficit and whether you're ahead of the game or if you're behind the 8 ball and how much harder it will get at different points in that prep. That's a skill that takes time to develop. And that's why coaching is so important. That's why we do what we do and we've been able to make a living off of it and been so successful at 3DMJ. But that's not the point. The point is the tool set that you use as a novice. It is going to be looking at scale weight, tracking your macros, diligently trying to hit specific numbers, and looking at scale weight over time, looking at trends, and making sure that you are on pace. Many times, because you just know, I'm supposed to be hungry, this is supposed to be hard, the main tool you leverage is just simply, I can endure it. I can gruel my way through it. And that's also what we celebrate in the bodybuilding culture. Who can persist despite how hard the cardio feels? Who can ignore their hunger signals and just stick to the diet? And you hear things like, oh, I'm in zombie mode, right? I'm barely making it through. And you go, well, you know what, bro? The one thing about zombies is they don't stop. You're like, yeah, that's right. And it is this culture and this approach of essentially trying to divorce yourself from the feelings of fatigue, the feelings of hunger, the irritability, and just powering through. Putting your head down and just grinning and bearing it. And that is a really, really useful skill to develop. And other athletes in other sports need it in a different way. Pushing through the last 100 meters of a 400-meter sprint, it's all mental and just making your body slow down as minimal as possible and pushing through that wall. I remember doing that in track and field. As a powerlifter, even for a brief moment, when you're on the platform and you feel that really hard stick on an RPE 10 lift where you picked the perfect number, you couldn't lift a kilo more, your body is going to tell you, just relax, there's spotters, bail, get out from underneath this. Or you have to really maintain a level of focus despite feeling that high level of adrenaline that I'm going to get crushed and maintain the bar path. So you don't lose that very precise position where you can exert just enough force to overcome the external momentum of that load. Or even in just powerlifting training, the monotony of doing high volumes of squat, bench, deadlift, you kind of just have to push through it. And at certain points, you're accepting that you might have some musculoskeletal pain, but you can move through it. The problem is that this often becomes the entire religion of the bodybuilding community, and it's something that is normalized to the point that they never advance past that. But when you look at other sports, you see that athletes become more and more and more and more and more in tune with their body. They do more things that resemble autoregulation. They do more things that we might describe as intuitive. And truly all that intuition is, when someone is not just hand-waving and excusing themselves and post hoc rationalizing, doing whatever they feel like they want to do. Intuition is really high-level pattern recognition. That's what an expert is. Someone who can see patterns and rely on the great deal of experience and expertise they have from the years of doing it to make better decisions that are more individualized and customized to them. So the difference between a novice and an intermediate and an advanced person is that you start to get to the point where you realize, yes, it's good that I have the skill to push through fatigue, to push through hunger, to get myself past those humps, but I also know what is too fatigued, what is too hungry. If I'm 12 weeks out, how should I feel? If I'm 2 weeks out, how should I feel? If I'm 24 weeks out, how should I feel? When the novice basically just approaches it as, I'm flipping the switch, I'm starting prep, doesn't matter how hard it is, I'm gonna get the job done. Again, great character trait to have and an approach you might need to use if you don't know what's appropriate. But the skill you should be developing is a better and better awareness so you know what is and isn't too much. And then along the way, you get a more fine-tuned sense of how you can auto-regulate as you get more and more contest preps under your belt. But I do think this takes intentionality. If you persistently do things like using macros and ignoring hunger signals, then it's becoming a crutch. You're only looking at the scale weight change. That is some form of biofeedback. You are seeing, am I losing at an appropriate rate? Is my physique getting leaner? And is my performance holding up? Those guardrails are good, and you should keep using them. But once you have new tool sets available, and once you develop new skills, you absolutely should leverage them. And it's not to make the process easier. That's not because it's softer and you're not being as strict on your nutrition. It is to get better performance. And the way you do this is to take an approach where the guardrails and the skills and the monitoring changes a bit. And what this looks like on the coach's side of things, because I am working, I'm giving my reports in. I just gave one right now to Berto and also Brian, who's been working with me in the off season. They're both kind of overseeing this prep and working with me. The coaching becomes much more of focusing on the outcome and telling the athlete where we want to get to rather than how to get there. And you're letting them use these more minute changes that might happen on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis outside of the typical structure of the report so that they can leverage that experience. And you're encouraging them to develop those skills. So what this looked like for me in my own athlete journey over my last 3 contest preps, 2019, 2023, and my present prep now in 2025, is that I've been getting less specific advice on how to modify my macros, how much cardio to do, how to modify my training, and more advice from Berto on where we want to get to. Are we on track with the timeline? How flat should I look? How many days of the week should I let my sleep be a little worse because my deficit is high? What degree of fatigue should I feel? And how sustainable should this feel for me? And also, what rate of loss and how much fatigue should it take to get to where we want to go? Because we're going to need to get into extreme levels of conditioning, and that doesn't happen by rushing it. One thing that is true, trying to lose a small amount of fat mass when it is all that is left on your body, anecdotally, never seems to go well when you try to rush it. You have to use a slower approach as you have less and less and less body fat. And even though the scale weight rate of loss might be decreasing, the proportion of the remaining fat that you have that you're losing might be quite similar or even higher. And this is why sometimes at the end of prep, when you see a half a kilogram or even a half a kilogram or a pound or less than that loss in the scale, it should be far more visible than early on. If you have 10 pounds of subcutaneous fat on your body or 4.5 kilos, that's not very much, but it's definitely more than when you only have 1 kilogram of fat mass left on your body, which as you look at my most recent updates, you might see is about where we're at. Now that I'm inside of 7 weeks out, as you look through my progress that I've done with my reports and my posing check-ins, you can see that I'm getting leaner and leaner and leaner, and that I now have visible hamstring separation. I'm getting the hints of glute striations, and I'm starting to look like I just don't have much body fat left on my body. And I think I'm maybe 1 to 3 kilos over stage weight right now, which is great. That's an improvement. I'm probably 1 to 2 kilos over the stage weight I had in 2023, if my guesstimations are right, we'll see there. But this means that I'm looking for a smaller deficit. I'm chipping away. I'm not rushing it because I have the time to do so. And that's also what it'll take to not flatten out, not lose muscle, and be able to maintain the right kind of training intensity and training quality so I can preserve everything. And ideally get ready early and start eating up. And there's a few things that need to go hand in hand for this. For this to occur, you really do need to challenge yourself to move beyond just strict macro tracking and ignoring your hunger signals. So we have some courses in the Vault which do a great job of teaching you about this. The default diet, nutrition fundamentals for lifters, as well as transitioning away from tracking, all cover different elements of how this should be an intentional process of moving away from just having macro targets and external cues and relying on internal cues. Some of the ways that you can try this kind of the training wheels is you might give yourself a nutrition target for your calories and protein, and then on your calories, just give yourself a window. Give yourself maybe a plus or minus 200 calories on that target, and allow yourself, as you develop the experience as a prepper, to go, you know what, when I feel far more fatigued than I'm anticipating, or I should if it's earlier in the week and my refeeds are a far way away, and the scale rate is doing what it's supposed to, I look flat, and I'm also seeing my weight drop, you know what, I'm going to eat 200 above, especially if I know my step count has been higher and I'm fatigued in the gym. Likewise, if you're a little behind in terms of the pace, you're not looking as flat as you anticipate, maybe your activity is a little lower than you thought, and you've been hitting your numbers, you go, you know what, I'm not that hungry, I'm sleeping okay, I'm going to go down to the lower end. And that's the type of modulation that you can do while still having quantitative numbers and knowing an average that should be the same. You can even track your average calorie intake in your spreadsheet that allows you to use more day-to-day auto-regulation, internally guided cues, and externally guided feedback from the scale, the mirror, and also your coaches if you're working with them to get the best of both worlds. And that's something that you'll leverage more and more and more over time. I think I'm almost at the point now where I could probably prep primarily by just gauging what's the appropriate level of hunger that I have over time to make sure I'm in the right size deficit, and look at the mirror and just look at the scale and not much else. That's basically what I'm doing, but I also do know roughly where my calories are. It's hard not to. But I think I could probably not hold on to that number quite as much and go more by internal cues. With that said, I do want to keep track of my nutrition in my mind at some point, and you will need to get to the point where you understand where you were at on your refeeds, where you were at on your low days, as you get closer and closer to your show and you start to think about peak week. This is where tracking numbers does become important. If you're going to actually peak yourself and modulate your carbohydrate intake and your calorie intake, and maybe even try to have a slightly higher than normal sodium intake or slightly higher water intake than normal, you need to know where those numbers are. And you want to inform that process by where you were in your refeeds and how you looked in response to them. So I'm not saying let go of all of the quantitative numbers, but they should have a purpose. The goal isn't to track. We track to make sure that we're achieving the goal. So keep that in mind. And once the goal does become an effective peak week, well managed and predictable, then you do want to look at the quantitative values that got you a certain consistent look during prep. Looking at the timeline related to your high days, how many you had, what were your carb intake levels, what were the typical foods you were eating, and you want to keep as much of that consistent as possible and then make one small change as you peak. So of course, that's a very individual process, but it does require more minute tracking of those external monitoring factors. So anyway, I hope that gives you some insight into understanding what is it like to progress from novice to intermediate to advanced, but it does need to be intentional. Coaches who are out there, you do need to be willing to hand the keys to the athlete a bit more and ask them to give you feedback. And if the only system you know is scale weight, picture, macros, you follow them, I tell you what to do, and there's always a week-long lag, and you have an experienced athlete who could do more and could use more internal cues, you're essentially holding them back. And for your novice athletes, you want to encourage them to try to start thinking about some of these things and getting a little more outside of the typical realm of those variables. You can do this during the off season and during mini cuts to kind of put those training wheels on in a more safe environment. So anyway, how have things been going for me now that we've talked about some of the philosophy of contest prep? They've been going really well. Training has held on quite well. My strength has been holding on pretty damn well. My training protocol has not changed. I haven't dropped volume. I'm still doing alternating full body push, full body pull, and training my middle deltoids and my calves pretty much every day, just taking one day off a week for my calves to recover. And then on Sundays, I am not doing a full body push or pull. I'm doing forearms, calves, and a little bit of extra delt and lat work on my weak points. The focus on exercises has sometimes been just, you know what, I want to do something fun or something hard. So for example, I watched Powerlifting World Games and I said, you know what, let me work up to like a 9 RPE single. We'll call it a PAP set, post-activation potentiation enhancement, and I'll do some back-off high rep work to see if I can enhance it. But really it was, hey, I got inspired by these powerlifters. I want to see if I can still squat well over 2 times body weight. So yeah, I squatted 185, low bar single. Makes no sense for prep, but sometimes in prep, you can do what is optimal. You can do what makes a lot of sense, preserves fatigue, maximizes stimulus, but sometimes you just need to feel a little bit of that animal, or at least I do. So that's a reason why I've done some heavy deadlifting. One of my goals that I've been trying to challenge myself to do is to see if I can conventional deadlift 200 kilos for a triple. Now, I don't know if I'll hit that because my strength is kind of just plateaued at this point, and I'm not sure how much better I can get at the conventional lift because I don't think I'm going to be putting on muscle. But I have done 2 sets of 3 with 195 that were probably around a 9 RPE, and that's pretty cool. Anyway, I'm not doing that every week. I'm kind of alternating between RDL, good morning, conventional deadlifts, and the squats I've only done like twice. And most of the time, I'm still doing things like Smith machine squats with the feet forward, leg press, good mornings, RDLs, back extensions, things that are very effective but also not too highly fatiguing and don't take up a tremendous amount of time because I have a lot of work to get through. So training is going well. I think I've been preserving a lot of my size and I've been enjoying the process. And I'm really not putting too much energy or thought into it because my lifestyle is very similar. It's just that the numbers have changed. And now I'm making sure that we're staying on pace and I've got my coaches in my corner. The final thing I'll say to kind of go back to the beginning is that it's so critical that when you are relying less on these external monitoring tools and you're looking more just how is my physique looking, because that's ultimately what the judges are going to look at, that you make sure that you're giving yourself realistic looks at your physique. You see a lot of people who use side lighting who convince themselves they're leaner than they are, or top-down lighting. Things that look really good on Instagram or really good on YouTube, and they might be great for engagement, and they might be great for your ego, but there can be a stark difference in what the mirror tells you when you're coaching yourself or what you're telling your coaches if you don't use consistent, honest lighting. When I was traveling recently, I got the privilege and pleasure of judging and doing a seminar with WNBF Italy and WNBF Spain. I sent a check-in in my hotel room that was similar lighting to what I had back in July, to what I have here, being much more honest, like direct sunlight from a window. But then I also did what was pretty cool lighting in the hotel, some top down, and you can tell the difference. These were taken hours apart, and I look, not even hours, actually minutes apart, and I look substantially leaner with the better lighting. And if I was to use that, I would think I had less to lose. I would think I was closer to the conditioning that I thought I had. Honesty is a really important thing, but honesty with yourself is a paramount thing. And catering to your own ego is a pathway to mediocrity. So it's really important that you give yourself that honest assessment, because if I was to just go by that amazing lighting, I would convince myself that I was only 1 kilo away from stage weight when at that point I was probably closer to 3. And that's the type of thing where you can have a rude awakening when you show up and you think you're diced and the judge's feedback is, yeah, you need to get leaner. So that is not going to happen to me. I'm going to maximize everything that is within my control, make sure I'm in the best condition I can be in, because I am going to be trying to walk with giants. So hopefully the next update will not come so far away. I'm going to be traveling to Europe again in September, and I think when I get back, I will be 3 or 4 weeks out, and I will give you an update then. But I really appreciate everyone's support. I cannot wait to see if I'm able to top my previous best. I'm almost confident that I have, but you never know until you're really in peak stage condition. And next update, I will probably be at that point or very close to it and potentially eating up. So thanks for following along, and I'll see you next time.